That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Kiss of the Spider-Woman, the 12th film directed by Bill Condon, which premiered at the 2025 Sundance Film Festival. Lionsgate and Roadside Attractions are releasing it theatrically October 10th, 2025.
Bill Condon did Dreamgirls?
That's probably what you're most familiar with.
Okay.
Earlier in his career, he did Candyman, Farewell to the Flesh, the first sequel to the Bernard Rose original. I believe we reviewed Mr. Condon's last film, The Good Liar, with Ian McKellen and Helen Mirren. I know you've seen his version of Beauty and the Beast, which I can't stand. He also did, I believe, the last two Twilight movies, those... I don't know, they're all nonsense, but the one that was broken into two parts. But, you know, I think for a brief period of time, Mr. Condon seemed like an interesting director with films like Gods and Monsters and Kinsey. But here we are with another musical.
What is Kiss of the Spider-Woman about? Valentin, a political prisoner, shares a cell with Molina, convicted for public indecency. An unlikely bond forms as Molina recounts a Hollywood musical plot starring Ingrid Luna. What is your pull quote?
A breezy but workmanlike approach in Condon's adaptation of the musical Kiss of the Spider-Woman detracts from the political potency and social commentary of the original film and novel, reducing the promise of its titular kiss to something more like a clammy, limp handshake.
Mine. More glitter than grit, Kiss of the Spider-Woman drowns nuance and camp.
Yeah.
So I watched the 1985 film a few days ago, and we reviewed it on our podcast.
Yes, directed by Hector Babenco. Of course, it's based on a novel by Manuel Poch, the Argentinian writer.
So the 85 film is not a musical, so this is based on the book and the Broadway musical. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned in our review of the 85 film that the only thing I knew about this story was that Vanessa Williams played Ingrid Luna on Broadway. So that was my only familiarity. I didn't know it was as political as it is. I didn't know there was a gay storyline. And I really liked the 85 film.
I do too.
It feels gritty. I felt fear for the main characters.
It's textured, it's layered. There are some, of course, dated elements about it, but, I think Babenco is a better filmmaker than Bill Condon as well.
This film is much more glossy, and because it's a musical, although I understand there's less music than in the Broadway musical, it brings to the forefront the character of Ingrid Luna, who in this film is portrayed by Jennifer Lopez. Mm-hmm. So we get a lot of Jennifer Lopez in this character who feels very one-dimensional.
Because she is, yes.
I think that Jennifer Lopez did what she was asked to do, and she looks lovely doing it. So I don't know that it's all her fault. It's just kind of it's not a very meaty character.
I agree. And, as a kid, when I was first introduced to this film, I remember as a child, I wanted to see what the Spider-Woman was like. And I remember feeling disappointed that Sonia Braga is not featured enough. But she's a metaphor, a subtext for really what's going on between these two men and the issues of escapism, and et cetera. So I think that really featuring Jennifer Lopez also kind of takes away from it, especially because she doesn't feel as interwoven into the main character Molina's psyche as much as Sonia Braga was.
So the story, we're told it's 1983 in Argentina. We're in a prison and we meet Luis Molina, portrayed by
Tonatiuh.
So he's a gay window dresser who's been incarcerated for public indecency. We'll get to the differences between the 85 film and this one. Mm-hmm. But Molina becomes cellmates with Valentin Arregui, who is portrayed by
Diego Luna,
who's a political prisoner. He's part of a revolution that's occurring in the country.
Because, of course, it's during the dictatorship in Argentina.
So the main thing that happens is these two bond, because they're cellmates. They're very different. One is gay, one's not. And Molina, the gay one, is very preoccupied with an actress named Ingrid Luna, who's portrayed by Jennifer Lopez, specifically a movie called Kiss of the Spider-Woman. Mm-hmm. So a big chunk of the film is Molina relaying the plot of Kiss of the Spider-Woman to Valentin. And that's where we get all of these fantasy sequences, and those are the musical components.
Yes.
And the story of this character kind of mirrors what these two men are going through. Because at a point, the warden of the prison employs Molina to basically spy on Valentin and tells him, if you give me information about the revolution, I will have you pardoned. You'll be freed. So Molina's trying to get information, but Valentin's not stupid. He's pretty tight-lipped, but they start developing a bond that accelerates pretty quickly compared to the 1985 film.
We need to get back to
We will definitely get back to that. But it's very clear Molina's in love with Valentin. And he goes up for parole, and it's clear that he's not going to get it. But then all of a sudden he's surprised when the warden calls him in and says, yep, I got your parole, you're free. Well, why would they do that? Because they believe that once freed, he will probably go talk to the people who Valentin told him about. Because the warden believes that Molina's not being honest. So sure enough, Molina goes to talk to someone Valentin mentioned, and that gets Molina killed.
Yes.
The end. And then we learn that shortly after the military regime fell, so all of the political prisoners were freed. So the final shot is actually Valentin walking out of the prison.
With a red-colored scarf as a gift from his dead lover that he holds up in the air, which is just a touch less corny than a very similar ending that mirrors then of the Danish girl with the handkerchief floating in the air.
I have no notes because I mean, I thought this film was kind of corny.
It is.
And then I think after watching the 1985 film, I was pretty disappointed because it does not have the grit. I think the most fascinating part of the 1985 film is the relationship between these two men and how they evolve into having a bond.
Yeah.
In a
hard one, but more realistic sense than in this film.
In this one, I feel like they both come across as gay to me. I think the casting's odd because in the 85 film, Raul Julia plays Valentin. And he comes across as gruff, masculine. He's very homophobic, but that starts to soften. Diego Luna is a little too soft to me. And then he seems very friendly and accepting, which seems odd because he does at one point have sort of a homophobic rant towards Molina. But then not too long after that, he talks about gender being a construct. Well, I don't know. Some of the language just doesn't feel right to me.
I just don't know that a revolutionary would be using those terms in this period about gender being a construct.
And if they did, they certainly wouldn't have preceded that with a homophobic rant.
No, I think that if they had the wherewithal to talk about gender being a construct and also had a homophobic rant, they would also have probably profusely apologize for having such a rant.
He also explains, I mean, they have a talk about gender. So, I don't know. I just feel like maybe they tried to infuse, because I have not seen the Broadway musical, it seems like they were trying to infuse it with maybe like modern.
I think they soften a lot of edges, which is to this film's detriment. And the other purpose of making something into a musical is you are able to tap into kind of more emotional, empathetic depths even because the suspension of disbelief is already so high that you kind of are transported, and that again with the themes of escapism, I think that should work well with this material. But one of the greatest softenings is, in the novel, Molina's a 37-year-old, and then William Hurt is also playing this character that is on the verge or has maybe lost some of their beauty, is maybe chasing that part of themselves, and also hasn't been able to rightly explore their own gender expression because they don't even have any kind of real terminology for that in this time or place. But that character was convicted of and received 8 years for corrupting the youth, suggesting that he had been playing around with a minor. So I find it really interesting that they try to make it more palatable by taking away some of the ambiguity, some of that gray area that really makes this a complex and uncomfortable thing, because gay people do wrong things sometimes too. It just feels very curious, and it feels. I think you had. What was the? How you said it felt? The word you used was like a sitcom.
Yeah. Well, it feels sitcom-y in the way that the two men interact. It kind of was giving me like Perfect Strangers with Bronson Pinchot. where they're kind of like this comedic odd couple. And that tone felt very strange to me. But since you already brought up one difference, we might as well keep going. So I think, well, another big difference is in the 85 film, Molina is referring to Ingrid Luna as one of these great Hollywood actresses he's in love with. And then he's relaying a couple of stories related to films she was in. The main one is about Nazi propaganda.
Yeah, it's a Nazi propaganda film that very interestingly kind of mirrors what's going on between them in the prison cell.
But in this film, the musical, Molina he just has a big poster of Ingrid Luna, Jennifer Lopez, and he's just obsessed with her in this one movie. So that's a big difference. Also, in the end of the 85 film, when Molina is killed, then it's done. But in this one, we get a fantasy sequence after he is shot and killed, where he's imagining dancing with Ingrid Luna, and then we cut to the political prisoners being released.
So, which is a much more hopeful ending than with Raul Julia at the end, suggesting that he also maybe has died as he's getting a morphine shot from being tortured, and he imagines himself running off with Sonia Braga.
I will say, so my critique of the 85 film, which I know it's not fully fair to compare because one's a musical, one's not.
This is based on something that was kind of, dare I say, kind of important, a landmark of queer cinema, really.
Yeah, for sure. I think the political messaging feels much more strong in the first film because of its sort of subtlety, because in this film, everything is like spelled out to you.
Well, I think there's really, we both mentioned this after watching it, there's really no sense of danger. And I think if you have no knowledge of the history of Argentina and what was going on in this period, we feel quite distant from that.
Yeah, I didn't feel any danger for these characters. There's a moment when Molina simulates having oral sex with Valentin to try to prevent the guards from coming in. And their reaction felt very off to what I would have imagined it would have been, or how it would have been portrayed in the 85 film, where they were much more violent towards those prisoners.
Yes, there's a sense of there's a hatred that's palpable.
Yeah.
In the original.
Speaking of the warden of the prison in the 85 film, it's the warden and his like I don't know if it's like the vice warden, but they're both pretty despicable.
Yes.
And in this one, the warden, I don't know. I wrote down I thought he was kind of corny.
I agree. Completely. Also, it's what's interesting is the Nazi propaganda film that is in really large part the narrative that is in the background. This is where we see The Kiss of the Spider Woman with Ingrid Luna. It's like a 50s MGM musical / creature feature, which that sounds a lot more interesting than it is. And the aspect ratio changes, the color template changes, and that's all very interesting, but it all feels like an empty spectacle.
Well, let's talk about that, because I felt like, again, the most powerful part of the 85 film was the dynamic between the two men. And like you mentioned, the Ingrid Luna portion is minimized. In this film, we spend a lot of time with Ingrid Luna. And these fantasy sequences, yes, Jennifer Lopez is beautiful and she can dance. I don't know, they weren't as... Because when Molina first says, I'm going to tell you the story about the movie, because obviously we can't watch it, but just imagine the way it was shot, and he talks about, I think, Technicolor and the richness of certain colors and the oversaturation of others. I was fully expecting when we see those visuals that we were going to get that. But instead, it just looks like...
Wicked.
I mean, but not as polished.
Yeah. Well,
that also adds to the... Because the sitcom nature of it, beyond the dynamic between the two men, it also just felt like an episode of like if it were an episode of Will and Grace where they pretend to be in a musical or something. Like, that's how it felt. Then the makeup. I feel like they were trying to paint some of the characters as if they were like a classic Hollywood film. But then it doesn't work. J-Lo looks so blown out.
As the blonde, as the star of Kiss of the Spider Woman.
Yeah, she's blonde, which I don't love. And it almost looks like there's a filter on her. Then Diego Luna.
Well,
I mean, his makeup looks like Donald Trump. It's like you could see that they painted a mask on him, but didn't blend into his neck.
I feel he looks like if Charlotte Gainsbourg had a really bad decade.
Then, when we finally see the Spider Woman, it's very disappointing.
It looks so.
It looks like she's on a green screen.
It's so costumey.
Yeah, it literally looks like a costume. Like someone's going to wear that for Halloween.
It's not period. It doesn't match the period of when that would have been filmed. You know, when we had a whole lot of beautiful women in creature feature movies like Leech Woman, Wasp Woman, Maria Montez, and Cat People, or not Cat People. That's a reference though. Cobra Woman, and then I don't know. It just imagine what somebody like. Just off the top of my head, maybe there's a better reference, but like a Tim Burton, how he would have crafted like a modern or a Spider-Woman that fit this era and what they would do with special but practical effects.
Well, because in the 85 film, it's clearly practical effects. We see this woman in a very tight black dress. It was giving like Morticia Addams kind of. And then you see this web in front of her and her touching it. Much more effective in this. And I almost feel like maybe the kinetics of it kind of ruined it, because J-Lo's kind of doing this thing, and I don't know.
Well, the dance things, if you are familiar with classic Hollywood cinema, all seem to have like a specific reference point. Like I'm getting Marlene Dietrich at one point, and then Marilyn Monroe doing Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend at another. And yeah, I feel it's kind of distracting. But the Spider-Woman in that bob that she's wearing, I don't know if this is an obscure reference, but I think it's a Mexican horror film where there's that young gay kid and his mom, and he's basically a serial killer. It's called Death at the Beach.
Oh.
And there's all these scenes of swimming in the pool, and his mother, played by Sonia Infante, has those earrings.
Yes.
Jennifer Lopez at the Bob is giving me Sonia Infante. Those damn earrings.
The other issue I had is because I'm not familiar with the musical, I didn't think any of these songs were memorable.
I think that Ms. Lopez's voice seems enhanced enough to where I'm like, oh, it's not as distracting as Madonna in Evita. But
it has to be enhanced because we've heard dozens of records from her and she doesn't sound like that. And then I think it's funny that when she was on tour this past year, there were all those clips going viral of her singing live and people weren't impressed. So then to hear her in this film, she sounds good.
Yeah.
So that's what makes me think it's maybe blended with someone else who can sing.
But yes, none of those songs popped. I think the song at the very end, when it's basically the dying fantasy of Molina, I think that is interesting because this is a musical that technically is based on a film, and the lyrics are all talking about that's what cinema does. But imagine this song be performed on Broadway where you're playing to the back of the room. Like there are interesting elements of something that I don't think was intended to be a film in the first place.
Then the gay sex in the 85 film is very subtle. It's kind of implied. We don't really see anything. But in this one, we actually do see them be physical. So it's much more clear that they did do something. But let's talk about their trajectory, because it seems like, because Raul Julia in the 85 film, he seems to develop like an appreciation for Molina.
It's begrudging though.
Begrudging. Yeah. In this film, it seems like Diego Luna is in love with.
He falls pretty quick, but also I think it's really evident in the first 10 minutes, the pacing of how this story is going. We're careening 2 points, it seems like, before we can get to our North Star, Jennifer Lopez. But
I feel crazy saying this, but it's almost like it's too gay. It's to function.
It's too camp. There's a scene where, and a lot of stuff is too on the nose, because Molina at one point, yes, one of the subtexts is escapism, but he verbally exclaims to Valentin, never push away positive thoughts, which felt very much like Snow White and those damn dwarves saying, whistle while you work.
Positives, I do think that the actor playing Molina,
Tonatiuh, who he has a small role in Carry On with Taron Egerton.
I thought that he probably did the best work.
He did, and every now and then I'm like, oh, this dialogue's not good, but he's selling it.
And Jennifer Lopez, I think, did what she was asked to do.
Yeah, but again, it's like that 50s musical that you can see how there was thought put into the detail, but it was giving me like that Renee Zellweger film Down with Love. It felt like an homage to the period rather than actually feeling detailed to it.
Sure. What would you give Kiss of the Spider-Woman?
It's getting a 0.5 point extra from me for featuring Paul Schrader's version of Cat People.
Oh.
In the end with Nastasia Kinski, because I absolutely love that film, and I love the original. I think you are a little more kind towards this film than I am, but I'm giving it a 2.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think it's, yeah.
I'm giving it 2.5 out of 5. It's okay. I would recommend people watch the 85 film if they haven't seen it.
Exactly.
That was much more effective.
And again, it's not like there aren't some criticisms. I think that film is deserving of receiving either, but yeah.
At the press screening, we were given a CD of the soundtrack. I don't know how I would play a CD, but if someone wants it, don't ask me. Anything else?
No.
Join us on Patreon and listen to our podcast. Bye.